Hello, welcome to Train Signal. You're watching this lesson on VMFS volume grow and hot extending virtual disks. In this lesson, you'll be learning how to dynamically grow VMFS volumes without using extents, as well as extending virtual disk sizes on a running VM. We'll also be giving you some great tips and best practices on sizing your LUNs properly, choosing VMFS volume block sizes, and also on extending operating system disk partitions after you have extended virtual disks. The ability to grow a VMFS volume without using extents is new to vSphere. In VI3, it was possible to increase the size of an existing VMFS volume by using extents, which appends an additional LUN to an existing VMFS volume so it extends across multiple LUNs. An extent is a term that is used in vSphere to increase the size of an existing VMFS volume by appending an additional LUN to it. While this works, it is generally not a recommended practice because a LUN failure at the root extent can take down the whole VMFS volume. Also, VMs can end up spanning multiple LUNs when using extents, which can cause performance problems in some cases. It's preferable instead to grow a VMFS volume by growing the LUN instead of adding another LUN to it. In vSphere, you can now grow a VMFS volume up to the 2 TB LUN size limit without using extents, simply by increasing the LUN size on your storage array. Extents can still be used though if you wish to grow a VMFS volume larger than the 2 TB limit of a single LUN. Up to 32 extents are supported for a total maximum VMFS volume size of 64 TB minus 16 KB. VMFS volume grow is very useful as many volumes are made too small in the beginning without any thought towards growth, and you may frequently find out later that you need more space on your VMFS volumes. In VI3, you had to power down a VM before you could increase the size of its virtual disk. Now in vSphere, you can increase the size of an existing virtual disk while a VM is powered on. Once you increase the size of a virtual disk, the guest operating system can begin using it immediately to either create new disk partitions or to extend existing ones. This can be very useful when you need to expand an existing drive for an application that must run on a specific drive and cannot use an additional disk. It can also be useful for adding disk space to a VM that is running out of disk space that you cannot afford to shut down to be able to expand it. There really aren't any requirements for growing an existing VMFS volume. It can be done while VMs on the volume are powered on, and it works with any storage device, including local disk, as long as you are able to grow your RAID group or LUN. In addition, it does only work with vSphere hosts that are using any VMFS 3 data stores, which are the default in VI3 and vSphere. You can extend the disk of any VM regardless of the operating system that it is running, but only certain operating systems will be able to see and use the disk right away without rebooting first. The supported operating systems include any edition of Windows Server 2008, Windows Server 2003 Enterprise and Data Center editions, and certain Linux distributions also support doing this. As far as limitations for VMFS volume grow, it is not supported for older VMFS version 2 data stores that were used in ESX version 2. In addition, you can only grow a single LUN up to the 2 TB hard limit in vSphere. This one is important, and we will cover more on that later on in the lesson. Limitations for hot extend of virtual disks are they only increase the size of the virtual disk file. It does not increase the size of the OS partitions. This must be done manually using the operating system or third-party utilities. It can also not be used to shrink virtual disks, only increase their size. Shrinking disks is supported in VMware Workstation, but not in vSphere. However, you can use the VMware Converter utility to shrink a VM's virtual disk in vSphere. Here's how to use VMFS volume grow. The first step is that you must increase the size of the LUN on your storage array. This is not done in vSphere, but it is done using the management tools of your storage array. Some vendors like NetApp and EMC have vCenter Server plugins for their array tools, so you can access them right from vCenter Server. Let's now demonstrate how to increase the size of an existing iSCSI data store using the vendor management tools. Okay, we'll now look at extending the size of your LUN or volume, whatever shared storage device that you're using, so we can increase the size of it so we can increase afterwards the size of the VMFS volume. Now, how to do this will vary greatly depending on the storage that you're using. Each storage device has their own utility for doing this. You don't do this at all in the vSphere client. However, there are some larger storage devices like the EMC and NetApp storage devices that have plugins to vCenter Server that allow you to access the storage management console for that device directly through vCenter Server. It basically just launches the application, adds a tab to vCenter Server, and launches their application, which is typically web-based. So here we have a small little iOmega iX4D. It's a 4 terabyte shared storage device. It supports iSCSI and NFS data stores. We're currently using it for iSCSI. So to increase the size of our volume, you'll see we have two of them here, a 600 gig and an 80 gig. And we'll increase the size of the smaller one from 80 gig to, we'll just make it double. So to do that, we click the little wrench here and just basically put a new size in. We'll just make it 150 gig. And click apply. Now this is going to take a while on this unit here, so we're not going to show you to the end, but this basically then is just going to increase the size of that underlying volume. So then once we go back into vSphere, we can increase the size of the VMFS volume to fill the additional space of this LUN that has been increased in size. So that's it for increasing the size of our LUN. After this, we'll show you how to increase the size of your VMFS volumes. Once you have extended the LUN that the volume is on, it is time to increase the size of the VMFS volume. In the vSphere client, select the host to which the VMFS volume is visible, and on the Configuration tab, choose Storage. Next, select the storage volume that you want to expand and click the Properties link. The storage volume properties will be displayed. Click the Increase button to expand it. The Increased Data Store Capacity wizard will launch and display the LUNs connected to that host. You can either add LUNs to the data store as extents, or if the LUN has grown in size, it will show Yes in the Expandable column. Select the expandable LUN and click Next. At the current disk layout screen, you can see the device in the free space that will be used to expand the data store. Click Next to continue. At the Extent Size screen, you can specify the size to increase the data store by. The default is maximum capacity, which uses all the free space on the LUN. Select the size and click Next. At the Ready to Complete screen, click Finish to begin expanding the data store, or go back and change your settings. Once the operation completes, you will see that the data store has grown to the new size. You may have to refresh the data store on each host that can access this data store so the new size is displayed correctly. Let's now look at a demonstration of growing a VMFS volume in the vSphere client. Okay, you can see here we successfully increased the size of the data store. It's now 150 gigabytes on the storage device itself, so the volume is that size. The VMFS volume isn't that size yet, but the actual LUN or iSCSI target is now 150 gigabytes. So next we want to go to vCenter Server, and we're going to select, we'll actually look here first, and we see here that this is a data store. It's 80 gig. Look on the other host, same thing, 80 gig. So to increase the size of that VMFS volume, we want to go to Configuration and Storage. We want to select that volume, and you can see here that it is 80 gig capacity. So to increase it, we want to click on the Properties link, and you can see here it says it's 80 gig. And over here, if you look at it, you can see the actual disk is 150 gig. The partition is 80 gig. So we click the Increase button. It launches the Increased Data Store Capacity wizard. See, it says here that the disk is expandable, so we can't expand it to that whole 150 gig that the underlying LUN is sized at. So we're going to select that. We're going to select next. And it's basically telling us that the free space, the 80 gig of free space, will be used to expand the VMFS volume. So the total capacity would be 150 gig. And here the default is maximum capacity, but you can uncheck that, and if you wanted to not use that whole space that's on that LUN, you could not use that. But we're going to click maximum capacity, click next. And just a little summary here telling us that it's going to be total capacity is going to be 150 gigabytes. And we click finish, and the task will run. You can see it down here, it's already completed. So now that volume is 150 gigabytes. So we click on close. And if we select our host here and select summary, you can see now that it automatically opened a task for all the hosts to rescan the VMFS volumes, so they're all aware of that new size. So here's the one host, it's shown at the 150 gigabytes. Select the other host, and that host is also showing the 150 gigabytes instead of the previous 80 gigabytes that it was sized at. So that's all there is to it. That's how you expand a VMFS volume. Let's now look at how to hot extend virtual disks. You first edit the settings of a VM, and then select the hard disk that you wish to increase the size of. Next, change the virtual hard disk size to the new larger value, and then select OK, and the Reconfigure Virtual Machine task will run. Once it completes, the virtual disk will be the new larger size. Let's now look at a demonstration of hot extending a virtual disk. So to do that, you select the virtual machine, and as you can see, it's powered on. This one is running Microsoft Windows Server 2003, and it's currently got an 8 gigabyte thick disk. So to change the disk size to increase it, we're going to right click on it, select Edit Settings, and next we want to select the hard disk, and you can see here you can change the size. Now you can either type in text or increase it. You cannot decrease it. It won't let you do that. So if I click down here, you see that you cannot make that disk smaller. You can only increase the size of the disk. If you want to make the disk smaller, you have to use something like VMware Converter that'll make a new VM and let you specify, it'll clone the VM and let you specify a smaller or larger disk. So you next just increase it. We'll make it 12 gig. Click OK, and you can see the task down here. It runs right away. It's complete. The new disk is now 12 gigabytes. Now if we go to that VM and select Computer Management, and then Disk Management, here it goes. We can see that the disk is now, the original disk is 8 gigabyte here, and there are now 4 gigabytes of unallocated space that if we wanted to use that, we can now either create a new partition out of that, maybe like an E drive, or we could actually extend the disk partition. There's ways to extend this existing partition to use up that additional 4 gig, so the C drive will actually become 12 gigabytes, and we'll show you that in the next demonstration. Okay, we've increased the size of the virtual disk, but this will just add unused space to the operating system disk partitions. It does not automatically extend the existing partitions. You will need to either extend the current partitions or create a new logical disk using the new unused space on the disk. Let's look at a demonstration of extending an operating system disk partition after we have increased the size of the virtual disk. Okay, we're now going to show you how to extend the OS partition of a VM after you've extended the virtual disk. Now let me give you a warning up front. While this usually works all the time, you always want to make sure you have a good backup before you do any modification to disk partition. So make sure you have a good backup, and now we're ready to proceed. So you see here on this VM, it has an 8 gigabyte disk that was expanded by 4 gigabytes, so the virtual disk itself is 12 gigabytes. So what we want to do is expand the C drive to take that take advantage of that 4 gig of disk, so the C drive becomes 12 gig. Now you can always make a separate disk for this with this 4 gigabyte of disk, make it a D drive, but in some cases you want to increase the size of an existing drive. Now depending on the operating system, depends on the method you want to use. For Windows Server 2003, you can, if it's a basic partition and it's a non-boot partition, you can do this with a utility called diskpart that is built into the operating system. It's just called diskpart. That'll let you extend non-boot partitions. Now if you want to do the boot partition like we're doing here, you have to use a third-party utility to do that. So to do that, we're going to use a utility called GNOME Partition Editor, also known as gparted. So we're going to shut the VM down. The VM has to be off for that. And while it's shutting down, here's where you can get the GNOME Partition Editor. You can download it from this site. You download it as a real small ISO file, which is only about 4 meg in size, and you use that to mount to your VM's virtual CD-ROM to boot from. This is essentially a live CD that has a little Linux OS on it that you can boot from. So the VM is powered off. So the first thing we want to do is edit its settings. And you want to go to options here and go to boot options, and to get the little menu that comes up when you first start the VM up where you can press escape to choose the boot options, it goes so quick that in most cases you don't have enough time to react to push the escape key to get it to prompt. So by setting this boot delay temporarily, we can get that to display longer. 30,000 is 30 seconds. It's measured in milliseconds here. So we just say OK. Now we power on the VM, and when it powers on, you'll see right away it says press escape for the boot